Hey everyone, welcome to this session of the Around the Valuation World. We're going to start this one off. I have happened to be actually, believe it or not, at an airport, but we're going to kick this thing off. Know this, that we're going to be putting some polling questions up throughout our sessions today, and you need to answer all the polling questions to get your continuing education requirements. And we have a great program today. We're going to start off actually with our friend, Michael Gregory. We're going to talk about core body of knowledge, and then Cheryl Hyder is going to come in. And I think this is really timely given everything that's going on with FTX. We're talking about cryptocurrency investment scams and that type of thing. And then Alina is going to talk to some rising stars. And then we've got our panel of judges coming back in, which is always a great session. And then our friend Cindy Collier, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in a while, Cindy, is going to give us an update on standards, and we'll finish up our program today with some elements on how to grow and build your practice, quick tips for experts. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Michael Gregory to give us his synopsis of industry headlines.
Well, thank you very much. Nice to see you there today, Mel. Good luck with your travels. Hi, Mike Gregory, and I'm a standard speaker here. Start off the session. You see some information about me. I'm the founder of Michael Gregory Consulting, excuse me, LLC. I'm a mediator, negotiator, consultant. I focus on business valuation and IRS issues, and I'm a professional speaker and involved with various technical issues as well. Today, we're going to talk about the AICPA releases a draft of business combinations guide, and I'm suggesting you download that and take a look at it. The final is usually pretty close to the draft, and there's some good information there for us as business valuers. On the ground report from the ASA and the International Conference relative to economy. So I'll be sharing some information from a speaker there and what he had to say about our economy and where we are today and elements relative to recession. ESG ratings, a compass without direction, meaning really don't know what we're doing, but you need to be aware this is out there. A great turnout at the AAML BVR National Divorce Conference, and I'm going to share some highlights from that conference with you. Take a fresh look at your long-term growth rate, says Grabowski, and he makes some recommendations as to what you might want to do. And then RMA is the financial benchmarking data of choice per the BVR survey, and I'm going to share some other sources with you and just make a few comments there. And then another call to discard the capital asset pricing model. There's an article that I have as a reference that you can download. And I tie this also to another article for your reference as well. So what are we going to talk about? Consider the AICPA draft business combination guide. Note the economic outlook from the former White House economic advisor. Note the environmental, social, and governance ESG guidance, and that's an up and coming thing you should be aware of. Apply takeaways from the National Divorce Conference. I think some good highlights there. Adjust your thinking on long-term growth rates. Reference that RMA is the financial benchmark of choice, but make note of some of the others that are in the survey. And note another call to discard the capital asset pricing model. So the AICPA has released a draft of business combinations guide. If you're involved at all in that area, I'm suggesting you download that. It has guidance and illustrations on account and valuation considerations. This is for all of us, whether you're a preparer, you're a valuer, you're an auditor, or you're some kind of specialist, anything to do with combination of entities. And the requirements of ASC 805 business combinations is also addressed in that guide. On the ground report from the ASA International Conference on the Economy. Now, the person who spoke, I heard him speak, is Levon M. Henry. He's the former White House economic advisor, and he's the senior VP for the Federal Reserve in Cincinnati. And he gave his opinions. He said, again, these are his own opinions. Slow growth for the next 6 months. And the Fed is not going to back off on raising rates until there is serious progress on inflation. So expecting that to continue with continual increases by the Fed. We won't necessarily have a recession. We could, and there are different definitions of what a recession is. If you base it just on 2 quarters of negative growth, we're already there. But with the economy doing so well and jobs with other things, most economists are saying we're really not there. And the Bank of America says that there may be a recession sometime next year, but that remains to be seen. On these environmental, social, and governance factors and valuation, I heard this presentation at the ASA conference, and I like the title, A Compass Without Direction. Why? Because this is a new or a hot topic, but how we value those things, it's not clear. Or what consideration should be given to them, that's not clear. So there are shortcomings in the objectives, the methodologies, and the incentives. On the other hand, the clients out there, the shareholders out there are asking for comments on environmental, social, and governance factors and valuation. So expect more on this in the future. The turnout at the AAML BVR National Divorce Conference. Here are some of the key takeaways. The employee retention tax credit. Companies have up to 3 years to file for those. That's a potential hidden asset. You want to ask about that. Look for cryptocurrency on the first page of a 1040 and ask about it. And it was found out that most valuers aren't asking about it. You want to make sure you're asking about it. Tailor report and testimony to the learning style of the judge. I mean, that goes without saying. My book, The Collaboration Effect, I talk about relationships and listening actively and preparing for a judge to research the judge ahead of time and present this the way the judge would like to hear about it. In divorce, market approach comparability is narrowly defined compared to tax matters. You need to know that for your given state on how that's approached. Excess earnings, I like it. The most used and abused depending on the state. So you should know the excess earnings method, the history behind it, how to apply the concept, not necessarily the numbers in excess earnings. And judges like side-by-side comparisons of opposing experts. Of course they do. Wouldn't you like to see a comparison of what the other side did and what you did? And let the judge find out where we have similarities, where we have differences, and then focus on where the most significant differences have an impact on the valuation. With audited financials, examine hedge funds and private equity. When testifying, your body language, now according to the article, when testifying, your body language represents 55% of the communication, and that's not true. Unfortunately, this gets misquoted. There are 3 PhDs who have written on this, and they've received, it's the attitude in communication. 7% of the attitude is the words. 38% is the tone. So think of a phone call, what you hear with someone's tone. But 55% has to do with the facial expression and body language. It's not the communication, it's the attitude in the communication. Bring in experts outside of your expertise, such as for intellectual property, reasonable compensation, or real property. Know where your limits are. So when you're on the stand, you're getting a Doe-Bear challenge, you'll be able to address that. Next month, I'm going to be talking about how we've done as experts before the court. And the appraisers have done the worst of the different categories of attorneys and other experts and CPAs. So I'll be talking about that next month. Take a fresh look at your long-term growth, says Roger Grabowski. He and Ashok Abit have spoke at the international conference, and they said the GDP includes both existing and new firms, but it's skewed. Growth is given by major firms like Amazon and Apple. And new companies, they have 2 to 3% real corporate growth earnings. But existing entities, your types of entities typically, it's only about 1/3 that, or maybe 1% growth. So growth might be 1/3 of real GDP plus whatever inflation might be. RMA is the financial benchmarking data of choice. You can see the percentages. RMA is clearly the highest at 78%. Then you have Biz Minor, 28%. Integra by Microbuilt, 8%. Internally developed their own, 4%. And 24% use others. But look at the others that are in here that you may be using in addition, or depending on what the facts are in your case. IBIS World, Capital IQ, S&P Global Intelligence, Business Reference Guide, Vertical IQ, and Trade Association data. And they always ask for Trade Association data to see if there's anything that might be available there. Another call to discard the capital asset pricing model. The cost of capital, if not capital asset pricing model, then what? It's an article by an individual by the name of Ivo Welch. He's at the UCLA Anderson Graduate School of Management. And we have a reference to it in the references in just a moment. This is similar to the comments that Pablo Fernandez has with capital asset pricing model and absurd model. So you look at these two academics and what they're saying about this and why, and then you might be thinking, why am I using the modified capital asset pricing model and what's behind that and if it's applicable or not? The research says the capital asset pricing model predicts high beta stocks should outperform low beta stocks on average because high beta stocks have greater risk. The data supports just the opposite of that. So Welch offers some alternatives and 10 considerations. I'm going to say that again. Welch offers some alternatives and 10 considerations. So when I'm thinking of references back in here, that's the middle one of these two. The cost of capital, if not capital, then what? By Ivo Welch, UCLA Anderson Graduate School of Management. You might want to download that and reference that, and then think about that in terms of application. The first item on top, that's the AICPA Draft Accounting and Valuation Guide on Business Combinations. I'm suggesting you download that. And the last one is an article that's been out there for a while, for several months. Pablo Fernandez, Capital Asset Pricing Model, and Absurd Model. So you might want to be thinking about referencing or downloading all three of those, skimming it if nothing else, but put those into your own references so you have them as a reference as well. And then each month, these are the different sources that I go to: BV Wire, BV Update, the Value Examiner, NACFA CTI training summaries, valuation products and services, the IRS, and then some other sources too. And that's me. That's my phone number. That's my email. If you want to get back to me on anything, feel free to do that. I typically get 2 or 3 calls every week from different participants from the show. If I can help you with anything, come back. The call is free, and it's my pleasure to help. With that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to just send this back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. And now we will have Cheryl Hyder. She's interviewing Dorothy Haraminac and Kyeson Utley. So Cheryl, if you want to, oh, look at you, all ready to go.
There we go.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Dorothy, Kyeson, so good to see you.
Well, I'll tell you what's really wonderful is Dorothy and Kyeson making time for us, Alina. That's, yes, for reals. You guys might remember, Dorothy, we spoke previously about, oh, there's your poll. We spoke previously about cybersecurity and cyber currencies, and she demystified the whole thing for us. And she's bringing her friend Kyeson along, who's one of her colleagues, and you are the director of cyber ops. Is that right or wrong, or
Yes,
how do I do that? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. So, but what you are, for those of you who are interested, you want to check him out on LinkedIn. I got spooked checking out his bio last night. He's certified in blockchain analysis, and he's also a certified ethical hacker. So with that, I think we can end this poll. Oh, look at that. Share the results. Yeah, we all understand that. That's cool.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to do that, Cheryl, because then we still have folks that have
Oops.
that
Sorry
are
about that.
waiting to answer. That's okay. I'll
Okay.
give
Sorry about
everyone
that.
credit for that. So
Give everyone credit. There you go.
I will.
So with that, today, we are going to be having Dorothy. Why is that not? There you go. Dorothy is going to start talking about the cryptocurrency scams, and then I'm going to lead into, hopefully before the end of today and possibly starting next week or next month rather, some of the scams and what you do about them. Dorothy, with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm on it. So Kyeson has come on as our director of cyber operations. I am a co-owner of GreenVets, which is a full service security and investigations firm. And I run the financial forensics division. I brought Kyeson on mainly because I got tired of answering people's cyber questions. He is now the new person to call out GreenVets for really all of the cyber related stuff that we do. And so I'm super grateful that we have him now. So what you're looking at is a list of red flags for traditional investment scams. I'm not going to read these to you. You guys can read. We know this stuff already. And I want you to think about how you would react if you're walking down the street and some guy pops out of an alley and says, hey, how would you like to make $1 million? Right? How would you react? You probably cross the street or be like, no, thank you, I'm good. That's what's happening right now. But people are falling for it because they aren't on the street. They're on the internet and they're not talking about dollars. They're talking about crypto. So people are just throwing these really well-known red flags out the window. So what we're going to do is go over what these look like now so that you don't throw them out just because you're now on the internet and they're now talking about crypto, because all of these things still hold true for cryptocurrency. You can go to the next slide, show.
Yeah, while we're flipping slide, Dorothy, just a quick pointer. You started out the last presentation demystifying everything for us in the same way. You took that also, why is that not sliding? Here it is. You took that also the same approach. You said banking is this, and this is cyber banking. Scams are this is crypto scams. Just little analogy for you.
Yeah, it really is. People get lost in like the details of how a blockchain works or why it's called that or what are people using it for in general. And it really doesn't matter. What matters is that there are scams here, there's value here, and the red flags are largely the same. There's a few differences, and that's what I really want to make clear, is that this stuff is not as different or as difficult as you might think. And so I want to kind of give people that high level view so that they're comfortable talking about this stuff or comfortable taking on one of these things. Because there's if you know, the IRS got rid of their theft from casualty and loss issue, right? You can't really just write everything off as theft and loss, but there are exceptions to that. And being the victim of an investment scam is one of them. And so for a practitioner, this stuff matters because your valuation of loss in these cases, that's something that is useful for a client. So I want you to understand that so you could start taking this stuff on too. All right, so this slide has 4 of those red flags highlighted. And what's going on is that somebody's approached on LinkedIn, on some social media app or something like that, and they're asked, hey, how would you like to learn how to buy crypto? And for some reason, people say yes. And now that some reason, I don't want to make light of it. That's the reason they say yes is because they're being victimized by highly sophisticated social engineers. And Kyeson's going to tell us a little bit more about that on the next slide. So I want you to understand that just because you're talking about cryptocurrency, or people will say, oh, you get a high return because you know Bitcoin, it moves up and down a whole lot. Okay. Or they'll say, no, it's a DeFi or Web3 loan, and so it's way more secure. It's all math. None of that is true. Right? Nothing is guaranteed in life, even some bonds. Right? And so certainly there are no guarantees with investments. So these solicitations are coming from people who don't have any identity other than their social media profile and don't have any other license. That matters. Right? FINRA tracks brokers and complaints against brokers and investment advisors. That's a safeguard. There's a safeguard that comes with licensure, not always a great one, but it's still a red flag when somebody's asking you for your money and you've got no safeguard for complaints or litigation. You've got no identity, no number, no nothing.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there with a quick question.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the lack of a safeguard because, you know, the protections that are afforded just aren't really there yet, would we have more protection if, in fact, this stuff was regulated? Which,
yeah, sure, you know, Madoff still happened in a regulated environment, so
sure.
so you would have some protections, but the method for regulation wouldn't be, oh, we need to regulate Bitcoin, right? It would be, we need to regulate third-party service providers, and those regulations already exist. They just need to be applied to this new industry
and adhered to.
Do what?
And adhered to.
And adhered to. So you're still going to have loopholes and that kind of stuff, but that would at least take away this idea that it's not regulated and therefore you should just do whatever and believe whatever. It would take away that idea a little bit. People shouldn't believe that anyway, but they do. And so that, you know, some kind of regulation around third-party service providers specific to cryptocurrency would help with that. Now, which regulator should be the one involved, I don't know. I don't think I could answer that one objectively. So,
you could, but you won't.
Yeah, no, I won't. This is
exactly.
So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of Mr. Madoff, so talking about the investment scams a little bit and how the flags would come up in terms of statements, you know, that don't match what's happening in the market, people tracing their own stuff back. How is this tied into what you guys are seeing?
Yeah, so one of the things that Madoff did was print statements, right? He said, you invested in these products and you earned this amount as a result of that investment. Anybody could have taken that statement, gone to the market and said, hey, hold on, this investment didn't actually buy, you know, it wasn't actually bought or sold at these prices. So how could I have earned that, you know, over this time period? People didn't do that for a very long time, like 9 years. So what happens is that you lose the ability to easily verify your statements, right? With Madoff, you have public investments, you have some other kind of complex holdings that were more difficult to verify. With cryptocurrency, it's relatively straightforward to verify your investments if you're not using a third party. And so it's that third party that becomes the risk. You should still be able to verify your holdings. You should be able to transfer things out easily. If you can't do that, then that's going to be a problem. So on this slide, what happens is that people fake those statements, and they know that it's online. They want to fake the fact that you're going to go verify it on the internet. So they'll give you a special website instead, right? To think about this, what they'll also do is try to show you proof of their investment. When is the last time your stockbroker, right, whoever at TD Ameritrade, showed you his own personal investments? That's not a thing, right? That's not sufficient reassurance of anything either. It's a red flag. And so I want Kyeson to kind of explain what the extent that these people go to fake this, to fake the statement, and even to fake the verification of those statements.
Yeah, happily. So like kind of listed, how Dorothy mentioned, with the fake websites or fake exchange platforms, these criminals or bad actors or whatever you want to call them, they create entire websites. They create entire personas. They'll use a closed down or no longer in business crypto exchange platform name that may have had good standing, and then turn it into a ripoff website where they then have people go off and try to recruit or find others, or, however it be, through a missed text message saying, hi, Jason, how are you doing today? And be like, oh, this isn't Jason. Or if it's through a LinkedIn conversation, just something with a romance scam even. But these people, when they do these things, it's very sophisticated, because it's not, they know who you are. Like, they'll do their own research on you. They'll find out information about you before reaching out. So they kind of know what to say and what not to say. It's more about manipulation of the suspect or the person or victim in this situation, and manipulating them based on what you know already. And then they take that information and then they say, well, we have an app right here on our website, just download it. You don't have to go and do all this stuff through Coinbase anymore. You can just download our app and trade directly with us, no problem. See, and then it looks legitimate if to the untrained eye, unless you know what you're looking at, and if you don't know how to do the verification yourself, then yeah, it looks pretty good a lot of the times, and they make a lot of large promises, and you actually see your funds grow. You will see your initial investments increase over time, but it's not real. It's through their platform only. And whenever they go to check, actually, there is no wallet address, or the wallet address doesn't have anything in it, or one of the many different situations for stuff like this. But they go all out: websites, paperwork, faking documents, whatever they have to convince you to give you their money.
Yeah, and this, like, what we're saying sounds like, oh, this isn't, I know better. I'm a CPA, or I do financial stuff anyway. I know better. We have a lot of cases that are people with really high level financial skills that are falling for this stuff because it looks so legitimate, because they get pulled into that promise of a high return. They get pulled in of being able to retire early. And these things are so good and so convincing that you don't just invest once and then realize it was a scam and go away. There's a new term out there called pig butchering, which is, I'm not going to just take you for a little bit of a small amount of money, or once or twice. I'm going to take you for everything you have, your entire life savings. And that's where our cases are right now. We have 4 or 5 active cases that are life savings level theft as a result of these kinds of scams. So it's heartbreaking, and it's preventable, which kind of makes it even more heartbreaking. You can go to the next slide, Cheryl. There we go. So these are 2 more of the same red flags that we already know. And what happens is that when you go to try to withdraw your funds from this fake website, from your scam account, basically, is you're asked for your bank account numbers or your credit card numbers, or you're asked to provide a percentage of the balance that you're trying to withdraw. Think about that. When you go to withdraw from, I use TD Ameritrade a lot. When you go to withdraw from your investment account, sometimes you are asked for a percentage of your balance, but not beforehand, right? Think about for taxes. That company will withhold some amount of the withdrawal for taxes. You're not asked to pay TD Ameritrade an extra 10% just to withdraw your balance. So that's a problem. They'll also ask for like a request of a good faith effort. Well, if you just give me your complete identity information, that'll that'll show good faith on your part that you're not actually closing your account or you're going to stay investing with us. That's ridiculous. But people think that that's true because it's cryptocurrency or because it's this new industry that they didn't fully understand before getting involved with it. When this stuff happens, usually the restriction on funds withdrawal is the big indicator to someone that it might be a scam. And at that point, it's very late in the game to try to recover anything. At that point, you're reporting a loss and you're reporting a scam. Your chances for recovery are pretty slim.
Well, the first question I would have about that is, when you say to somebody, I need you to trust me. Excuse me. This is where Kyeson comes in and says, well, no, they've already done the social engineering. You already trust what's essentially a stranger. It's like the guy that I call Patrick, who comes knocking on your door and says, I want to sell you new windows, and I'm a vice president of the company, and you can trust me. This is the new version of that scam, but we can trust, the online Patrick, because he's already researched you, and he's got all these alleged common links with you.
That's right. So when we say, it kind of sounds scary when we say, oh, this person has already done their research on you. It's not that hard. Right. Facebook will happily sell me quite a lot of market research about individuals. So will Google, so will Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. Those big data aggregators don't really care who they're selling data to. It's very easy to do market research, right? How you use it. You can use it to try to sell me a Tesla, or you can use it to try to scam me out of my life savings. I mean, I guess depending on the Tesla, you might be doing both in one. But so like this is a big problem, right? It kind of goes back to what I've been on before talking about in your data security and how much information you're putting out there and that kind of thing. All of that enables people to do this kind of stuff. And so if you'll go to the next slide.
I'm going to go to it as I say, I'm going to repeat something you told me in a conversation once. Online information about somebody is what they do to themselves. Only you said it a little bit more eloquently. You did it to yourself, whatever you allow people to find out.
At some point, you're responsible for the cyber incidents that you're becoming the victim of, right? This is like walking across a golf course, like a driving range, right? At some point, you ignored the sign that said, hey, don't walk through here, or hey, don't cross this fence, or there are balls flying at your head. At some point, you've ignored a whole lot of red flags to get to where you are, and you bear some of that responsibility. Now, that's also held up in court cases where people have tried to sue AT&T, or they try to sue these large providers that they thought had a protection mechanism for them. And it turns out the Supreme Court said, no, it doesn't. If you read the fine print of your user contract, they're not actually liable to you for any loss, even if you've got two-factor turned on and any of these other things. And so that's a problem. No one's out there to protect you, even when you thought you had consumer protection mechanisms for that. They're not. And so that's, you've got to take some of that responsibility on yourself. So
one other question, then I'll let you guys continue. What about, we see insurance that's now being offered, cyber protection.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
joke of the day.
It's not necessarily the joke of the day. It's not any more of a joke than any other kinds of insurance policies are, right? In some cases, they do cover loss, but you have to be very specific about that kind of coverage. There's a clause in a lot of cyber insurance that says, if this was for business, right? If this was an internal issue, if there was any internal role in this, then we won't cover it. Well, email compromise scams pretend to be internal people. And so it's very easy for an insurance company to point to, spoofed identities and say, well, that had an internal component, so we're not covering it. So you have to get very specific with that coverage and very specific with the proof you provide. And that comes into play with digital forensics and incident response, really, where you're not just responding to a board, or you're not responding to the public whose consumer data was stolen. You're also responding to your insurance company to make sure that you're hitting all those boxes that need to be hit for them to cover that incident. And what costs they're going to cover is going to vary significantly with your premium also. They're not a bad idea. I think my homeowner's insurance now offers some identity theft protection and that kind of stuff. And so it can help cover the costs. It's not going to roll back, the clock. It's not going to help you prevent it from happening in the future. That's something that only you can do.
Right.
I just want to, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one more thing regarding like cyber instances and all of that. The value of global damages have like over doubled since 2017, I think it was, and it's in the billions of dollars. Ransomware attacks can take people for millions, and take it from me when I say that most all of the instances are involve an internal component. That is the goal. It's the easiest way to manipulate or trick a human being than it is to try to get past all these safeguards. It's much easier to just go through the person, and
That's right.
that is scary, but that's the reality, and that's how 600 and some billion dollars has been lost to cyber crimes and whatever else in that realm. I want to say 2021. So that was only a year ago that billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars has been lost to these kind of attacks.
Yeah, I think these are things. It's much easier. What he's talking about is it's much easier for me to call customer support of Twitter and say, hey, I'm one of your IT guys, under contract under so-and-so, and just name a director that I found on the internet. And I need access to your system because I need to fix this problem. If I do that a bunch of times, eventually I'll get a yes. And that's much easier than trying to, perform like a network intrusion. Technically, it's easier for me to just call around. It's so easy. The people that did it were 3 teenagers. Right? That's how the Twitter hack, a couple years ago happened. They just called around and got all angry when they got told no. That's textbook social engineering. And so that's it. And that is much easier. It's the weakest link in any kind of cybersecurity program is going to be the human. That's always going to be true. That was true in the 80s even, and it's true now. So on this slide, we're looking at how these things happen. Like, what is it that's so convincing that get people to say yes? We're not talking about some guy popping out of an alley anymore. We're talking about somebody messaging you on LinkedIn, and you look at their profile and it looks pretty good. Or maybe you have a couple of people that are also connected, because a lot of times people will just hit connect to increase that number of connections and not actually vet who they're connected to. There are also the romance scam components, which Kyeson kind of mentioned. You've already got people who are looking for a relationship, or they're looking for a human connection. And now here's this person who looks appealing, who's telling them, hey, not only am I interacting with you, or I need some information about how to get around in your town because I'm new here, or they're asking them for some other help. They're also saying, hey, by the way, I've got an investment opportunity. And that's not always the opening line. That might come after a month of conditioning. That might come after a month of you already having interactions with this social media profile who you believe it's an actual person. We've had cases where we go through and explain what all has happened. What different social media profiles were interacted with, how those profiles were used to fake all of these accounts and to fake all of these investments, and how this person believed them. And at the end of going through all that, the victim in our case is still like, well, what about that social media profile? Don't you think she lost all her money too? Because they still believe that was a real person they were talking to. They really believed that the photo on there was of a real person and not of somebody, not of a group of hackers that are, completely in training, just like we are right now, to learn how to do this stuff. They still believe it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are I think 90% of our cases are for people who are over 55. And so they're retired, they're looking for something, they're looking for some other human connection or something like that. Some of them are for people who are over 70. That's who's getting taken for life savings. At that point, your life savings is much, much higher than like mine is right now. And it's a much bigger loss. But there's a lot of different ways to get someone to do what you want them to do online. There's a whole industry around that. And that's what you have to realize. You're not being scammed by an individual. You're being scammed by a team of people. And it's actually that team that gets used to kind of pair up this investment opportunity thing too. Like saying, well, you're not really just investing with me. You're investing, I'm working for my uncle, and my uncle is, retired from Goldman Sachs or somewhere. And he brought a team with him of actuaries and risk managers. I don't know if you guys know any, investment broker retirees, but if they're retired, they don't usually use their niece or nephew to cold solicit people on social media. That's not how soliciting investment works. Especially if you already have a team of actuaries and risk managers. That's not a thing. And it's not a thing with dollars. It's not a thing with crypto either. And keeping that in mind is really the best way to go about it. Not just keeping it in mind for yourself, but keeping it in mind for anybody who's older than you that's a part of your life. Like, you should take what we're telling you and have these conversations with people. Like, when I go visit my parents for Thanksgiving, I'm going to disconnect their router. And then I'm going to plug some other stuff in to prevent them from doing things on the internet, because this stuff is real, and they're just smart enough to know how to click through stuff and be convinced by these things. They're sophisticated social engineering scams. And so, I mean, this stuff varies, but in the end, the profiles are fake. The transactions you see are fake, and there's no one to go after that. There's no real identity to go after. That's really the biggest part of the problem, is that there's nobody to sue when you get to this point. It's just a loss. So there's a question. I think we have time to take that question, don't we, Cheryl?
We should. So the question is, if we suspect a family member has been caught up in these or other schemes, what do we do?
You need to report. And I think we're going to get to that in part 2, which is next month. But you need to report it. You need to gather all of this evidence, and you need to report it a variety of places. That includes, actually, I think that's on the next slide. So we'll go through one more slide, and then we might be able to get there.
I don't want to pull this poll down because I'm just going to move it.
Yeah, you can.
I don't want to pull it down and get in trouble again. So.
And you can just minimize it or close out that window, Cheryl, either way.
There you go. I just moved it out of your way. So there was also a question about sharing the crypto scam slides. They should be in the presentation pack, shouldn't they, Alina?
These, all of these PowerPoints and the slides will be available tomorrow. Chinda is going to make his a package and put everything together, and he'll send it out to all the attendees.
Oh, nice. Okay. If you need, we have a couple of other brochures on this, if like that are PDFs for how to talk to people and how to report this stuff. So you can send me or Kyeson an email, and we're happy to send that to you guys also. So this slide is really the last 2 red flags that we're going to talk about, and that's the high pressure sales or the time limits for getting in. And the biggest one is that request for secrecy. So if you already suspect a family member has been caught up in this, it might be very difficult to get them to open up to you about it, because now they're embarrassed. And that's a big problem. So having this conversation, and sometimes explaining that it's very common helps. Sometimes that doesn't help. So you kind of have to use what you know about your loved one to have this conversation. But this, people are shown that something's going to expire. Some opportunity is going to expire very quickly. The things where opportunities for investment expire are options. And those are already complex investments. So if you don't understand options, you probably shouldn't be playing around with them. I got a call from one of my loved ones that asked me if I'd ever heard of options. And I said, yes. And they said, well, I just watched a YouTube. And so I went to their house and turned off their internet. Because that's a problem. I mean, that's not where you learn about this stuff. And the same is true for cryptocurrency, where yes, there are opportunities that expire. But if someone is pressuring you to buy right now, or it's going to go away, and you're going to lose millions if you don't buy right now, or you don't transfer this money right now, that's a red flag. You're only out what you put into it. And if you're pressured to put into it, it's likely that you're going to be out that as well, because high pressure sales and time limits are very big red flags in traditional investments and in these crypto scams. And that request for secrecy, That's a big one. They'll use that for two ways. One is that they're going to look at, like, they're going to show you these like trading strategies and say these are super secret and don't share them with anybody, and don't tell anybody because it's a really limited opportunity and it's limited offering, and if everybody knows about it, then that's going to be a problem. That starts to sound more and more like insider trading, which is kind of why that's a red flag. But the other way they use this is at the end, at those withdrawal, when you're trying to withdraw, they'll say, hey, remember all those times I asked you to keep this secret? Well, the reason I asked is because this is actually illegal. And if you try to withdraw anything, then we're going to report you to the police, or we're going to report you to the SEC, or we're going to report you to the FBI. That's really scary for somebody to be hit with that, because it's cryptocurrency, and the other thing people know about crypto is that criminals use it too. So they know it makes a lot of money and criminals use it, and that's what they use to get involved in this stuff. And those are the wrong basis points to use to make decisions about investments. Kyeson, can you tell us more about how people fake these transactions, like how they set up that website and why people fall into this kind of trap, this fake transaction thing?
Yeah, of course. So there's a very simple program that comes standard on a lot of Linux operating systems that lets you clone a website, basically. It lets you clone it, every aspect about it. You get it to a folder. You just got to upload it from, you can use a hosting provider, GoDaddy even, however you want to host the website. But effectively, you can just modify the values, change the name, just like you would on a text document if you know what you're looking at. Open the document. It's going to look like a bunch of confusing code. Control F, type in Coinbase, for example. You'll find all the instances of Coinbase. You can then change the wording, change the color, do all of these things. And whenever you're showing somebody, look, your 2% investment, you're getting 2% back today, and it'll be 2% the next day. If it's on an app, you legitimately just have to manually change the value or put in an auto calculation to where your 10,000 gets multiplied by 0.02 and then adds back to it. That's what you're doing every day. If you don't know what you're looking at and you see this every day, you don't see how simple the back end is. You just see how pretty the front end is. And you see that this is legitimate. This is real. This looks really good. Like my money is getting increased steadily and all this good stuff. It looks legitimate. It has an address and a phone number. I can call them, all of these things. And it's just to trick you. Effectively, that's it. They even use identities of well-known people, well-known celebrities in other countries is something that I have seen where, because they post so many pictures, it's easy to pretend to be one of them and use a different name. And that's the best way. And it's just all of these things working together. It's not one for people who are of low intelligence. It's smart people. Smart people are the victims of things like this.
Because the smart people, or even people who socialize in certain groups, are the ones who are saying, wow, this is really cool. How did you go about putting yourself in this position? Oh, well, I invested with so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And then there you have it. But the scary part is we are at the end of our time. And right now, Kyeson and Dorothy, you guys have scared the daylights out of everybody. Everyone is unplugging their routers. Way to go, Dorothy. Success. But I think next month, we're going to be getting into more of the nuts and bolts about the whole FTX collapse and the ripple effects, or wave, maybe is a better word, throughout the crypto industry. I think that's what we're going to be talking about. Is that right? And Kyeson will tell us how it happened.
Yep, Kyeson's going to talk about how this happened and how it's gonna grow. We're going to learn about how many more people are going to be having to list bankrupt on their forms now. But we're also going to cover how to report this stuff. And so the one question, like, what do you do if you get caught up? We're going to spend a lot of time next month, going through exactly this slide and not just who all to report this to, but how to report it. What kind of evidence do you need to gather? Where do you get it? And then we're going to do a little bit about how you actually should buy cryptocurrency if you're interested in doing that. I don't recommend investment advice for anybody. If you're happy lighting $100 bills on fire for the entertainment, then maybe you should consider investing in cryptocurrency. If not, maybe not. But we'll go through that just so that you have like a baseline for reference, right? This is how it works if you were actually trying to buy it. This is how you'd verify it if you're actually trying to verify it. And this is where all you report it. On top of what on earth is going on with FTX, because that is a nightmare of a case for sure.
All right, well, with that, I want to thank you both again and just urge everybody to check out both of their profiles and the rest of the team over at Green Vets. They are phenomenal. All right, guys, back to you, Alina. Thank you again.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. And thank you to Dorothy and Kyeson. And Cheryl is right. I have been in some of the presentation that Dorothy have done, and they are amazing. So join them in any of the trainings that they may be given, because you will learn a lot. And something that she said that it was very interesting to me about the bonds and investments, she's right. If not, go look for Puerto Rico bonds to see if they were safe. But now, thank you, Cheryl. But now we have a segment that our first one was in September, is our Rising Stars segments. And I'm very happy to be able to interview these Rising Stars. And they are honorees of our first 30 under 30 class. So today we have with us Dalton Hopper and Shannon Abraham. And to give you a little bit of background, if you weren't with us in September, where Mel Abraham already interviewed 2 of our Rising Stars. I'm sorry I missed that one. There was a hurricane coming through our island that day. So, but now I have the opportunity to be with these 2. And our 30 under 30, if you remember, we have initially a 40 under 40 class. And now we have 30 under 30. So these are young professionals that are the ones that are going to be leading our profession now and in the future. And for us, it's very important for you to know them, because we may not be that young. And these are the guys that are going to be teaching others, working around with valuations. So we want to meet them and that you know about them more. So I'm going to start with them. We have Dalton and Shannon, as I mentioned. And now I'm going to leave Shannon to start talking about her. Shannon, I'm happy to have you with us. Talk to us a little bit about your firm, what you do, your area of specialty, and so we can know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I'm Shannon Abraham. I currently work at Henry Schein as the valuation supervisor for the dental practice transitions group. So my group focuses on valuing dental practices only, and I review and approve all the valuations that come through our US division.
Interesting. How do you get into this profession?
So I actually started in valuation while I was in college. I had an internship with a small accounting firm in downtown Pittsburgh, and they actually had a valuation group. So that's where I did my internship. And after enjoying it, I decided to accept an offer that they gave me. And so I worked with them for a few years. And then I took a job opportunity in Columbus, Ohio, where I worked in the valuation department of an investment bank. And I also, while I was there, focused on dental practice valuation. So it was kind of a good feed into my current position.
That's great. To everyone else, we have our polling questions, so make sure that you respond to that. It's very interesting because you are especially dedicated to dental valuations, to that industry. So
Yeah.
Are there many of those? How do you, enter in that particular niche?
Yeah, so I did, when I was in Columbus at the firm, I did dental practice valuations along with some other things. But at Henry Schein, we have a ton of sales representatives and they kind of sell our valuations. And then we do probably 500 to 600 dental practice valuations a year. So we do a decent amount.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot. That's very
interesting.
It's
It's an interesting sector to be in, but it's been fun.
Yeah, especially because healthcare is a complicated industry. It's not as evaluating retail or manufacturing. Healthcare has very specific even the words that we use for healthcare are different. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon. Dalton, thank you for being with
morning.
us.
Hey.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending when the people are located. And thank you for being with us. And thank you for responding so quickly when we send you the email. So really glad to having you with us. So Dalton, talk to us a little bit about you, your firm, what you do, your position. I know you are a supervisor. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. Like you said, my name's Dalton Hopper. I'm with BMSS. We are a regional firm. We're based in Alabama, have 5 offices around the state and about 250 staff, and do the full service advisory and CPA world. So I lead our valuation and forensics practice. We do, tons of tax compliance, financial reporting, litigation matters, kind of the full gamut from a valuation perspective. And I came to the firm previously from Ernst & Young, and really came in at the right time. I think our leadership was looking for someone to take over the valuation field. So with my forensic background and previous valuation life, it was a great and natural fit. So it's been going good, and we're very busy. I think a lot of folks around the country are, and we're seeing it too.
Yeah, so your background is a little bit more similar to some of us that we come from, accounting firms and doing other stuff, not only valuations.
Yeah, absolutely. We, do right now it's a tax planning season. So getting a lot of emails about, everything, everybody wants to know for planning, and we're all kind of marching towards that, that click down coming at the end of 2025. I was talking to somebody about it this morning. So I do a lot of estate and gift. And so I'm planning on seeing a lot more of that in the next few years.
So you are going to have a lot of work in December with the next year planning.
I plan my year that it's really loaded at the back end with 10-15 deadlines for gift matters, and then after that we start the end of the year with a lot of planning. So it's a busy holiday season, to say the least.
Okay, so it's very interesting because you do valuation for different areas. When you learn and you took the CPA, for example, you learn about the different for state taxes, planning, forensic. You do valuation for litigation, so you do valuation for different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a heavy concentration of clients in construction, distribution, manufacturing, government contracting, but it really runs the gamut. Everything from did a wine and spirits distributor a few months ago to just a kind of mom and pop construction firm. Really see the whole gamut of everything from not profitable to off the charts to different industries. So it's really always something new and exciting, and kind of a different problem each day.
That's great. So the next question is to any of you that want to respond first. So what it was like to receive the notification that you were an 30 of the 30 honoree?
Yeah, I can go first.
Okay.
It was a huge honor when I received the notification. I actually took about 5 years off of valuation to run a fulfillment company before going back into the valuation field. So it was an honor to know that my time spent in the industry prior to me coming back could still be recognized and appreciated, especially because I'm sure there were a ton of amazing people that could have been nominated for it. So it was really awesome.
That is great. That our other co-host of the program, he's Mel Abraham. He's not with us right now. And when we saw your name, we asked, is she your family? And he's no, we are not related. So we said, Shannon Abraham. Oh. No, but it's so great because definitely there are so many young professionals that can be recognized. And sometimes, since they're not out there, we don't know a lot of things that they do. So it's very interesting to have you and to know that that you are part of this industry too. So Dalton, can you share with us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And like Shannon said, extremely exciting and very humbling. Just from the volume of text that we've gotten to research, there's so many kind of giants that I think have contributed to the valuation field. So really to be honored, and recognized by those around you is really rewarding and humbling. And just looking back at the different versions of text from, the first edition to the sixth of where we're at is huge. And so it's really exciting to be honored.
That's great. So as young professionals, what are some of the challenges that you have been going through in this particular industry, in the valuation industry? Because I know that there may be some. So what you can share with us and how you did you overcome those challenges? Shannon?
You want me to go first? Go ahead. Go ahead, Dalton.
Okay. I think, testifying in litigation matters is always a huge hurdle for younger professionals. And so, that's, I think, kind of the first thing that's a barrier probably from a younger, professional to someone more seasoned. In addition to that, the networking and building the relationships, building the referrals and connections, just because it is, a lot of times a hunt, kill, repeat world. That can be very difficult to kind of get into, especially from my background in the CPA firm, where a lot of the work is recurring. If we get an audit or a tax client, then we may have them for the next 30 years. But after this valuation gets done, it's on to the next thing. And so I think those are kind of the challenges that I see, and kind of making sure our firm is ready and able to kind of do the non-recurring work, but also kind of from a professional level, making sure you're proficient and things like that. That's where the testifying comes into play.
That's great. And for those of members that are hearing this presentation, that may be hearing this now or via YouTube in the future, I think something that you mentioned is very important, because when you're really young, especially clients, not only litigation, but clients may think that you don't know what you're doing. So it's very important that us that are more seasoned give you space to do that. During this week, there was a client asking me to go and do a presentation of evaluation that we did. I'm like, no. One of the guys that work with me is part of your class. So he's 30 under 32 in this class. And I say, no, he's going to do it. He can do so. So we need to give you space. So for those that are hearing this, give space to young people. They are very smart and they can do the work. And if you do everything, they never are going to learn. So mentoring is very important. So Shannon, what about you?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges that we see in our company and the valuation department is, we have a lot of doctors that spend their entire life building this company of theirs. And so when we do the valuation process, it's very emotional for them. And it's kind of like when you live in a house all your life and you go to sell it, you always think it's worth more than it might be. And some people have realistic expectations and some don't. So what we've really been working hard on is trying to set those expectations up front so that we don't blindside and upset them when they get their value. So I think that's been something that's been really important for our group to work through.
That is great. There was a presentation, I believe it was Mike Gregory in one of our last episodes that talked about M&A and the percentage of those M&A that go through because people have, wrong expectations about the value. So it's very, very interesting that you mentioned that. And in terms of generations, I'm not going to say I'm Generation X. I'm going to say I'm a Centennial. But what about you? And I know everyone says now it's a millennial's fault, but we have a lot of Gen Z on the working already. So what about misconception about your generation and what you can say people, those mavericks that are in the industry about your generation and the expectation that they may have from you for the future? Dalton.
Yeah. So kind of to go back to what you touched on earlier, mentoring and asking the more established professionals to really engage in that. But I think it's also important from the younger perspective that we've got to really respect the work that was done in the profession, the barriers that were overcome and the battles that were fought to kind of get us all where we are today. So I would hope that, from a younger professional coming on board, I would let people know that we really want to be engaged. We want to be involved in the conversation and contribute, and hope that they would see that as an opportunity to not only pass the torch, but to kind of pass down everything that's been learned. And I know there's tons of folks out there that have forgotten more about valuation than I know, and so taking the time to mentor and pass that along, I know I would be extremely grateful for that.
Thank you, Dalton. Shannon?
Yeah, I think that there's a mindset about millennials that maybe they're not as work focused as other generations, and more or less they kind of just do what they need to get by and don't really go above and beyond. But I don't completely disagree. I mean, I've run into other millennials myself that I disapprove of their work ethic, but I think it's unfair to lump us all into one. I take pride in everything I do, and like Dalton was saying, I really enjoy when people are willing to mentor me. And I think it's just, I work around different time zones. I've put in a lot of hours in order to hit deadlines and things. So I think it's important to understand a person's mindset, and kind of what they've achieved in their goals, instead of kind of lumping them into the generation they're born into.
You are right. And as Dalton mentioned, mentoring is very important because it's also our mindset. If you have this prejudice about some generation, millennials or Z, it's going to be difficult to work with you. And we have to understand that everyone is going to be different. So there's a lot of excellent professionals, and they may be different to us. So we have to, accommodate how this will work for all of us at the same time, and to meet client deadlines, as you mentioned. So before leaving, any advice for young professionals as yourself?
Do you want me to? My advice would be to set goals for yourself and work hard to achieve them. Don't always try to fit in, because I've really found that companies love when the younger folks kind of give their opinion and give their ideas on how to make things more efficient. So I think you just need to find what you're passionate about, and really, really work hard to get there, because I think it's hard to motivate yourself if you're not fully passionate about what you do. So just find what you love and kind of be yourself in it.
Thank you. And someone asked, while you were talking about, what about younger generations prejudice against veterans? But yeah, I guess we have to do our part, right? Both sides. We have to recognize the veterans and the mavericks in this industry, in any industry. So it's about not only the young people, it's ourselves to work with everything and everyone, and respecting the gray hair is very important too. Dalton.
Thanks. I think my advice would be to kind of get in and take on the tough projects. I think that there's so much nuance in valuation that, it spans tax, accounting, finance, legal, kind of every arena out there. And there's so many details that, at least for me, I've learned so much more from doing the research and getting something wrong than I have any other way. So I think it's the kind of art of the profession that has to be taught a lot of times. And you can only learn that by doing and being involved and learning from those mistakes. So I would say don't be afraid to really jump in and get something wrong.
That's great. So, and to speak up, right? Whenever you have questions or you need mentoring, not to try to solve it all yourself, because that is very important. So I really appreciate your time. I'm really happy to have you today, and thank you for being with us. So if you have anything else to say to people to know more about you, this is the time before we pass to the next section.
Yeah, just want to say thank you guys for having me. It's been amazing, and I appreciate being able to get to come on and speak.
Thank you, Shannon. Dalton?
Yeah, same thing. Thank you for the time, and happy to be here. And thanks for NACPA for all the work that they do behind the scenes and putting everything together.
Thank you to both of you, and hopefully we can see you in the future in one of our conferences, so we can hang out and talk a little more about this. So thank you to both of us, to both of you today. And now I'm gonna pass the microphone to Janae. She's gonna be interviewing our judges. Janae.
Great, thanks. Enjoyed hearing from our young folks, and speaking of the other generations and respect given to them, we have the Honorable Judge Driscoll, the Honorable Judge Platt, and the Honorable Judge Yates. Welcome you guys back to our show. We always love hearing and getting experience from these judges. So we wanted to talk today about serving as a joint expert or mediation expert. And the first question I wanted to ask you judges, if you're all here, Judge Driscoll and Judge Platt, I saw you earlier. Judge Driscoll and Judge Yates, are you guys live?
Yeah, they're telling me I can't start the video because a host has stopped something. I'm not sure what that means.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who's that?
That's
Judge Platt. I think I'm here. This is Judge Yates. Can you see me?
Yep, you're here, Judge Yates.
Okay, I'm gonna send you a little ping there, sir.
There it says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it, whatever that is.
You're there.
We found you.
Steve, you're in.
Thank you.
All right, great. The first question I wanted to ask you all is, have you seen any experts get themselves in hot water one way or another, acting as a joint expert or a mediation expert?
I would say this: you can't get yourself in trouble if it's clear what your role is and you never forget your role. So, for example, in my business docket cases, it was not uncommon for me to appoint somebody as an expert on behalf of the court. For example, somebody who had a background in electronically stored information. And in other cases, the person would appear as an expert for one of the parties. And I would always be clear with the expert that the expert was either wearing the hat of a court-appointed expert or alternatively, the hat of an expert for one of the parties. And I think by the court and the expert clearly defining those roles, it's far less likely that they're going to get in any trouble. The same with mediation. When an expert is involved in mediation on behalf of a retaining counsel, then I think the expert's role is clearly that, obviously you want to properly inform the court, but you're still in some capacities acting as an advocate or a representative of one side. On the other hand, when you're serving as mediator or an adjunct to the mediator appointed by the court, then clearly you don't have a dog in the fight, and your goal is simply to try to inform everybody as best as you can about the principles of valuation that govern the analysis.
And I want to echo what Judge Yates just said. Although, Janae, I want to start by dissenting from the view that you said that we are of a different generation than the youth movement we just heard. As you saw Judge Yates' picture, he's still very young, and that white beard is gone, so I'm still young, and Judge Platt is young too. So, and we're young for judges, believe it or not. We are young for judges, so I'll still go with youth. But despite my callow youth, I'll share in Judge Yates' analysis, which is the central point, which is really that as an expert, you may be on the side, retained by one side, but you're still not an advocate. And when you are a court-appointed expert, don't even say the A word. Don't breathe it in at all. You are absolutely neutral. You absolutely don't have a dog in the fight. And that's where you get in trouble in general as an expert when you start appearing like an advocate, but you certainly get in trouble when you are taking sides as a court-appointed expert. That doesn't mean that one side has the better point and you ignore that. But when you are putting on your advocate hat, that will get you in a lot of trouble.
Maybe one side made you mad, or they wouldn't give you information, so you come out swinging at them. Is that kind of what you're?
I don't think you come out swinging at any. Again,
That's the problem, right? Like if you come out.
One thing, as a judge, when you're challenged as a judge, what do? When someone speaks and starts raising their voice, you just get quieter and quieter, and almost in serial killer movies, right? So that's the same thing as an expert. When as a court-appointed expert, when one side isn't giving you the information, okay, thank you so much, counsel. Thank you so much, one side. I appreciate that, and I guess I'll have to note that in my report. There's no emotion; it just is what it is.
If I could add perspective of the most young at heart of this panel, but with the most experience, both as a mediator and formerly as a judge, and still as a judge. I think it's important, and I build on what both Judge Driscoll and Judge Yates said. It's not only important that you understand the role, and perhaps your title, and I would add to that, it's you might want to check to see who's paying you, because the world we live in is, although maybe not as much today as yesterday, but they're very conspiracy oriented, and lawyers are not, and parties are not immune to that culture. But it's important that all parties and counsel understand what your role is, not just you. Doesn't do you a whole lot of good to know what you're doing if they don't. And they might not, because they either might not because they don't want to or they can't. There are several monuments to the proposition that certain lawyers raise serious issues as to how they pass the bar exam, and are advocating. But if they don't understand what your role is, because they're somehow involved in your compensation, they need to be made to understand. That also, I'll throw a little bit of interesting trivia. When I say who's paying you, meaning it depends on what you are. I'll use Maryland as an example, and I'm not sure this applies in New York or Michigan, but in Maryland, if a court appoints you as either a special magistrate, now we call them magistrate instead of masters, or as a neutral expert, and there is any kind of litigation involving you or your responsibilities, the Attorney General of Maryland is obligated under Maryland law to defend you for no charge. That's actually happened. So if you're a neutral expert appointed under the authority by the court, it ought to be, I think, in the order what your role is. Then nobody can argue about it. If you're appointed as a neutral expert, that role is a very, very different role. And if you're in a mediation, and if you're an expert in a mediation, then somebody hired you, unless it was court ordered. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, who hired you and who's paying for you, and what do they think your role is?
And tying into that, I just saw a question in the chat feature about how do you respond to an attorney's request for certain language in the objective expert report. And I think that comes down to, if you're comfortable with it, you put it in. If you're not comfortable with it, well, you are an objective expert. So, you're being appointed by the court. Your responsibility is to the court, not to the advocates. Presumably in a situation like that, the advocates are splitting the cost, perhaps usually 50-50. So you're not responsible to any of them. And even if the costs are being apportioned other than 50-50, you're still responsible to the court. So, thank you, counsel. I'll still be making my report consistent with my responsibility and my appointment to give an objective expert's report. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was a good question and a good answer. Do any of you have any last notes on that first question before we move on to the next question?
I think we're ready for the next question.
All right.
I'm just shocked we're going to get through. Oh, we're going to get through more than one question in our segment. Usually we rip off each other for a long time on this. That's all right.
You guys are showing a lot of restraint. How important is avoiding ex-party communications when you are serving in a joint capacity, or ex parte?
I'll jump in on that. Depends on what your role is.
Okay.
And preferably that's spelled out. In a mediation, normally, if your role in the mediation is as a joint expert, which is, then the next question is, how did you get to be a joint expert? And it would be, at a minimum, everybody needs to understand that, and everybody needs to have the role spelled out in light of how you became the joint expert. And whether confidential, every mediator that I know and every judge that conducts mediations will tell the parties in particular what confidentiality means. And assuming that somebody who all the lawyers know that, don't, is the rule. And I always tell them, I know you don't need to have this lecture, but this is more directed at the parties, but it isn't. So that's how you take care of that. Again, not just you understand, they need to understand.
And I would echo what Judge Platt said. On the occasions where I appointed a valuation expert, I made it very clear in the order of appointment that the valuation expert could consult with either side to gather information. Because if you are a court-appointed valuation expert, you're going to need some information that only one side has. And as long as that's what you're communicating about, I have no problem with that.
Good. What else may be different for an expert serving in a joint capacity?
So important to maintain neutrality and really to understand your role is very much an arm of the court. So just like we, the three of us and our brothers and sisters, go in simply to call balls and strikes. We may enjoy the game, but our job is to call balls and strikes. If you appreciate that role and at every point, whenever challenged, you won't be challenged by the court on that. The court will be very happy to see you there. But when challenged by the attorneys, and tying into the poll question from earlier about, attorneys asking for certain language, just to understand and to pull back from that, and to, of course, listen to all sides, because that's what the judge is going to be doing. So listen to the lawyers who are chirping in your ear about what your report should say or what you should consider. But again, to appreciate that your role is to assist the courts. Your role is very much that of a neutral expert.
Right. I would agree with exactly what Judge Driscoll said, and just remind people who are court-appointed experts that the amount of weight assigned to your opinion is going to be much greater when you're a court-appointed expert than when you're an expert and we know you're on one side or the other. I only appoint as court-appointed experts in valuation cases people whose opinions I've seen many times before and who I absolutely trust. And so when I appoint somebody in that role, although I'll have questions at the evidentiary hearing, I start out with a presumption that the court-appointed expert made every effort to give me the straight story and come up with the best valuation number through the best methodology that the expert can do.
And I would just add to both what Judge Driscoll and Judge H said by saying it makes a difference. The question is what may be different for an expert in serving in a joint capacity. Joint capacity in what? If the court appointed you to the litigation, the court, you're serving the court, and your neutrality and the court's confidence is of utmost importance. And your ability to persuade you've got one audience, the judge who's deciding the case. If you're a joint expert in a mediation, again, how did you get there? Was it court ordered or was it agreed upon? And if that's the case, then I would make this distinction. Obviously, if you're an expert, a joint expert for the court's going to make a decision. So you're an advocate, but you're an advocate for the most intelligent view and that's what the court puts you there for. If you're in a mediation, and this is not universally agreed upon in both mediators and the judiciary, presumably you're there to settle the case. That's what mediators do. If you're an adjunct to the mediator as a neutral expert or a neutral whatever you want to call yourself, and whatever the court called you or whatever the parties called you, then you're there to try to resolve the case. That's a very different opinion. The opinion may well be a risk assessment that will persuade both sides to compromise to the extent that, or to recognize that their interests are beyond their best or worst day. And again, that's important. If you're going to do that, then you're going to probably make somebody annoy somebody at best. And if that's the case, everybody needs to understand that is your role. That's what they hired you to do. If that's what happened, if you got hired. So again, what's the role? How'd you get there? And to a certain extent, as important as you understanding is everybody around you understanding.
And tying into that, and I just saw a question in the chat that really asks the question that leads to a point that we've all been hinting at, which is, what do you do when one side isn't giving you the information you want, or you feel that one side is maybe playing a little fast and loose with facts? If the judge appointed you, let the judge know about it. Now, that being said, being a judge is very much like being the parent of young children. When your kids fight with each other, what do you say when you have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old? Work it out among yourselves, and then when the blood starts flowing, that's when you jump in, right? Well, so too it is with us. So if you're not getting the facts that you need from either side, try to work it out, document it, but also then let us know. Let us know, because we can't do our jobs if you're not able to do your job. So, you work it out in the first instance, but then certainly bring it to our attention when you feel that there's some obstreperousness or recalcitrance or other good attorney 5-syllable words that you feel that you're experiencing.
Okay, very good. Have you all seen experts? Oh, did you have something to add, Judge Yates?
I was simply going to answer another question in the chat, which I thought was very good. The question is, when you're a court-appointed expert or a neutral expert and the two sides are presenting drastically different facts, should you try to make determinations about who's right in the facts, or should you provide two separate analyses? I would say you provide two separate analyses, because ultimately the judge will have to be the fact finder. And when the judge makes those factual determinations, the judge wants to be able to move quickly to what the court-appointed expert believes is the appropriate methodology for evaluation and the result that flows from it.
Would it
I
not
would
be,
echo that for sure.
would it not be true to say that in all cases, whether or not we're a joint expert or mediation, working in mediation for a mediator and working as hired by one side, that we're providing information to the fact finder, the trier of fact, for them to make the judgment? So we're not making
Right. Absolutely.
Correct.
your decision.
Correct.
Absolutely right. I mean, don't be afraid to give us your opinion, but recognize that it is a neutral opinion. And again, tying to what Judge Yates said, answering one of the other chat questions, if you don't have all the facts that are necessary, or if you feel that one side is holding back, please let us know. If you feel that there are two competing set of facts and it's up to us to decide the facts, then you have to prepare alternative scenarios, and that's okay too. Because that's what we do for a living all the time. We're always choosing among competing scenarios.
Final question for you all. Have you seen anything that makes a successful transition for an expert who maybe has in a mediation scenario and then is called by one side or the other to testify at a trial as an expert witness.
Do you mean in the
relate-
context of different
ahead,
cases or the same case?
Same case.
Well, I would always be nervous if you are assigned any sort of neutral role and then you become an advocate later on. In my view, if somebody is court appointed either to act in a mediation capacity or in an advisory capacity for the court, there are no circumstances in which you should subsequently allow one side to hire you to make a presentation as their advocate.
I would just add to that, just what Judge Yates said, and what makes it that way in large part is the confidentiality requirement. If you were a mediator in a case, then whatever information, facts, communications is what we call it in the mediation world, have been given to you in confidence, maybe, okay? If it wasn't in front of the other side, there's at least an element of confidentiality. Once again, not just you as a mediator, but everybody, parties and counsel, and frankly, the court. I will tell you my own experience. I've had one, and I wasn't an expert. I was a mediator. I got called by the court because I also am a recalled judge and asked to preside over a 3-week case, business case, and I said I can't. I unsuccessfully mediated that, and I simply can't do that for a whole bunch of reasons. And the answer was the lawyers are the ones that want you to do this. And I said, that's nice to know, and I appreciate the compliment. The answer is still no. What happened was all of them then got back and said, we will sign a waiver of confidentiality, a waiver of everything imaginable, as they put it. We would really appreciate it. I said, well, sometimes the volume of my business varies inversely with the level of confidence in the current judiciary. But in this case, I said, I'll take a look at it, but I think they're making a mistake. Ultimately, what they did is they did agree. And I probably made a mistake, although the case ended and it gets settled later. But the confidentiality is the biggest problem. It's not the only problem. The appearance of impropriety, it could be massive. And the answer is probably not a good idea to do it, even though I did do it on that one instance. But the bottom line is everybody's got to be on board, or you need, or don't even talk about it, and probably don't talk about it even if they are on board. I have a form
also,
that I actually used just where they waive confidentiality about 15 different ways. But bottom line is don't do what I did.
But Judge Platt, you had a lot of experience under your belt at that point. And so it ties into the point of the previous conference. Maybe not something to do, certainly for the first 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years as an expert. You know, Judge Platt knew what was coming because he's been in the business of being a judge for so long and knew that this was a defined risk, nevertheless a risk, but we knew what could happen, and he minimized the risk as much as possible. And even yet, he still is saying he still is uncomfortable doing it. So I think don't do it is a pretty good rule of thumb, subject to the, if you're in the business 20 years, maybe you can think about it then.
I think that's extremely helpful because a lot of us, we're not coming from a legal background. And so we don't necessarily know the problems that we can get ourselves into.
I would articulate the rule that Judge Driscoll just said, further articulated by saying, when in doubt, don't.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
Well,
By the way, that also works for being married for more than 20 years, as I've learned over the last couple of years. Also.
When in doubt, don't.
Yeah, don't even disagree. Right, exactly.
That's great. I also wanted to bring Michael Kaplan on to ask him a question. We've talked with you guys some about things to do, things not to do. And Michael, if you're around, we all learn a lot from your stories and experience. Would you be willing to share any stories from times where maybe your position as a joint expert or serving in mediation became uncomfortable, or where you did something that you wished you could have a do-over?
It's the act that we wish we could have had back and thought about it a little bit more. Number one, I wish that early in my career, maybe 40, 45 years ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with Judge Platt, Judge Yates, and Judge Driscoll and get their perspectives, because it would have certainly helped me in the earlier days of my career. And when I look back and I think of some of the situations that I was involved in as a court-appointed expert or as a joint expert, be it in a case that was going to trial or a case that was being mediated. One of the things I think about now when I'm asked to be a neutral expert, a joint expert or court-appointed, is I ask myself, do I have previous professional contact, did I, with either of the attorneys or the parties? What do I see in the past? Because often the court will ask the attorneys to suggest, to propose names of potential joint experts. And of course, the attorneys are going to put up names of experts that they know see things the way that they do. And I remember one or two situations where I was appointed as a joint expert. And I was nominated by an attorney with whom I had a long-standing professional career. And what I found is that it would be easy for me to accept a representation that my longtime attorney would make to me, as if I was getting that directive from both sides. And it was actually I had one situation where when the court eventually realized that I had a long-term relationship with one of the experts, with one of the attorneys, and the other attorney was someone who I only crossed paths with occasionally, the court removed me as the court-appointed joint expert and named someone else. And that was totally appropriate. So I'm much less likely to take on a case where I have a long-standing relationship with one very, very different from the other attorney.
Yeah, very good point.
Okay. Another thing that I do is I make sure that, at least as relates to what I'm doing, I make sure that every step of the way, both attorneys, counsel for each of the parties, they are fully enlightened as to what I'm doing and assumptions that I'm making and the direction that I'm going in. And I get their input along the way, only for purposes of their confirming that they know what I'm doing. Okay, they don't make my decisions for me. So, and I have these conversations typically with both counsel together. I will periodically call for a telephone conference with counsel for each side. And then there's no question that everyone has heard it. They've heard it first and they've heard it at the same time. When I have to make assumptions, I know it's hard to believe, but in some cases, we don't get all the documents, all the evidence, all the information that we hope to get. And we have to make assumptions. Again, I bring the attorneys together and I go through my assumptions with them. So everyone is on board. They don't have to agree with them. They can give me their input, but I don't want anything to be a surprise when I formulate my opinion, my conclusions, and it makes a difference. It just takes the risk out for the expert.
Very good. Very good. I appreciate you all taking the time every month to come and give us your experience and your opinions. I know it's helpful for me. I know it's helpful for our attendees, and they really, really enjoy it. So I appreciate learning everything that you guys will give to us every month. And Alina, I will pass control back to you.
Thank you, Janae, and thank you to all the judges. As someone
Thank you.
mentioned, these sessions are really incredibly valuable. So thank you for that. And now we have Cindy Collier with standards. So Cindy, are you around? Let's see.
Yeah, yeah,
You're muted.
yes, I'm here, and I'm
Okay.
trying to get my my camera working. Let's see.
Okay, I can
I
see
think
you
I
now.
got it.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. What an excellent panel. The whole session has been amazing today, but that was very, very interesting. So I'm going to talk with you all today about the standards board, and
Just to
and
note, Cindy, before you get started, I got a poll question up there. Everyone, please answer that. Don't end the poll for me, please. Now, some of you have the power today, so thank you.
okay. So I am completing my 3-year term on the standards board, and it's been a tremendous opportunity. I've really admired and have so much respect for my fellow board members and the advisors that have completed and made so much of the work available on the website during the past 4 years. So I know that we've discussed this at each of the around the world sessions, and I'm hoping you all have had a chance to take a look at some of the tools and resources. I'll have the website up in a couple of minutes and my slides. And speaking of that, I guess my slides, we're doing it a little bit differently than I was used to. So I may need a second here. Can you all see my slides, or I need to see what I need to do to get them?
So Cindy, what you'll need to do is down at the in your Zoom toolbar, you'll see a green share screen.
Okay, perfect.
So click on that.
Okay, great.
And then click
Okay.
on your PowerPoint, and then it might ask you to share again.
Okay, click on my PowerPoint. And is it, let's see.
Or whatever screen your PowerPoint's on, it'll just click on that screen and then share again.
Great. Are we good?
I'm not seeing
Is
it
it
yet.
not seeing it yet? Okay. It didn't ask me to share. Okay, let me try this.
So you see, you have the green share button.
Yes, I clicked it.
Okay, clicked it. And then it should bring up whatever, if you have more than one screen, or it'll ask you which screen you want to share. Do you just have one screen?
Okay, it's saying send link and it's got a send button. Do I do that?
No, it should just ask you to.
I hit
You're
the
just sharing
share.
whatever that you want to see. So if you push the share and then you click on whatever it is that you want to share, if you've only got one screen, if it's your PowerPoint, and then share again.
Okay. And it's got send link or copy link or send a copy. PowerPoint. Let's see if this works. No, no. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry about this.
Let's do.
Can you continue without the presentation, or Wendy, do you have the
I think it's
presentation that
better.
you can share it?
Yeah, I think it's better. Let me just try one more minute. How do I, okay, right now I've got the presentation up and I've got the around the world up at the same time. So I'll hit share.
There you go.
Is it showing? Okay, great.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
good.
then just go up to the top there. Oh, all right, you got it. You're good to go.
Okay, fabulous. So that's me. I'm Cindy, and I've been a long time NACFA member. I've been part of the faculty. I've been on the litigation board, the standards board, the education board. and very involved in the development of the body of knowledge the last 30 years. So in this session, well, let me just talk for a second about the board. So I'm completing a 3-year term on the standards board, and I just have tremendous respect and admiration for the board members and advisors that have helped complete so much work for the NACFA community this past 3 years. And I want to be sure everybody checks out the website, and I'll put it up in just a minute. And I wanted to thank specifically Trish Hoffner and Meenal Agarwal, and that's our chair and our current vice chair, as well as all the members and our EAB advisors, Zach Myers, Carl Steffen, Mark Hansen, and Mark Cusick. And so today, what we're going to do is we're going to address 2 very commonly raised questions. Actually, they were raised again this past week. Where to find the NACFA professional standards and frequently asked questions, and answer 2 of the common questions that are frequently asked. So with that, this is the website, and this is where we have our tools, and some specifically that came up this week that I find are extremely helpful are the business appraisal standards comparison chart, and also the international comparison chart of definitions, which relates to the international glossary of appraisal and valuation terms. And we have a US domestic chart of definitions, which compares the domestic as well as the international. So all of those I find are extremely helpful in my practice, and hope you all get a chance to take a look at them. So we're going to address 2 of the questions that we frequently hear on the standards board. And the first question is, are standards of value, such as fair market value, treated the same from state to state relative to matrimonial dissolution litigation? And the answer is it depends. A valuation analyst must work with their client and or attorney to identify the state-specific terms, definition, and application of the standard of value. What we're getting at there is when you accept an assignment to provide a valuation for family law purposes, it's very important up front to discuss with the attorneys exactly what the laws are in their state, and ask them to provide any guidance that you need up front as to what may be specific to that particular state for valuation purposes, because it does vary quite a bit from state to state. So we're all familiar with these terms, and recently we've tried to really refine that definition, and with the international glossary of appraisal valuation terms, and with the charts that we pulled together for both the domestic and the international comparisons from organization to organization with respect to the glossary, we've tried to really refine those terms. So in the US, in terms of fair market value, we're talking about the price expressed in terms of cash equivalents at which property would exchange hands between a hypothetical willing and able buyer and a hypothetical willing and able seller, acting at arm's length in an open and unrestricted market where neither is under compulsion to buy or sell, and both have reasonable knowledge of relevant facts. And we can contrast that to the fair value standard of value, for which there are different definitions depending on the concept and the purposes. Fair value is typically defined or imposed by a third party, for example, by law, by regulation, by contract, or financial reporting standard setting bodies. And the most commonly used term for financial reporting purposes is under the IFRS and US GAAP, which defines fair value as the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement date. In terms of fair value for family law purposes, it can be defined in many different ways. And for that, we frequently go to case law. And the state of New Jersey provides a number of cases that we can look at. We'll talk about that later. In terms of investment value, it's generally defined as the value to a particular investor based on individual investment requirements and expectations. And in Canada, they frequently say the value to the owner. The intrinsic value is the value that an investor considers on the basis of an evaluation or available facts to be the true or real value that will become the market value when other investors reach the same conclusion. And so there's a significant difference between those different standards of value. It's very important to know the differences. So for fair market value, generally, fair market value is accepted in Connecticut, New York, Wisconsin, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Florida, Missouri, Hawaii, South Carolina. And some of those states, not all, but some of those states do not include any personal goodwill, because personal goodwill is the property of the individual and not the marital property. So the treatment of personal goodwill varies very significantly from state to state across the country. In terms of fair value, we mentioned that New Jersey is a good example of statutory fair value, and only a few states expressly use fair value as the standard of value to be used in a divorce proceeding. These states typically reference shareholder dissent and oppression cases, which use the fair market value standard. In a divorce, the court evaluating discounts may see the application of discounts as an unfair advantage to the party that will enjoy the benefits of the asset. So there are a number of implications depending on the state and the definition of fair value used for marital dissolution purposes. Investment value is defined as the value to a particular buyer or seller, and it's also known as the value to the holder, meaning the operating spouse. And some of the states that use an investment value or value to the holder concept are Arizona, California, Colorado, Kentucky, Michigan, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, North Carolina, and Washington State. So, so this means that two states may use a standard of value term like fair market value in slightly different ways, despite both states adopting the same standard of value for a particular type of litigatory purpose. So it's very careful to have that discussion with the attorney and be sure that you're in agreement. What is the standard of value and how is it applied in marital dissolution cases in that area? And it may make a difference from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. For example, it may be applied slightly differently in San Diego than in Los Angeles versus San Francisco or Napa. So it's very important to understand the specific area and how the courts in that specific area, even in the same state, apply the standard value. An example of this in action would be the state-to-state differences noted in the fair market value with regard to enterprise and personal goodwill? Are they treated as the personal goodwill treated as a marital asset, or is it even distinguished at all? And as we discussed, that varies from state to state. Does the litigation, the second question that we wanted to talk about today is also in the area of disputes. And that is, does the litigation reporting exemption apply to engagements that are not in formal litigation, but are contested in dispute or in some form of alternative dispute resolution? And the answer is yes, that the litigation reporting exemption applies to engagements where a dispute exists. They don't have to be in litigation. They can be in arbitration or mediation or any type of collaborative or other forms of agreed dispute settlement arrangements. According to the VD of the NACFA professional standards, evaluation performed for a matter before a court, an arbitrator, a mediator, or other facilitator, or a matter in governmental or administrative proceeding is exempt from the reporting provisions of these standards. And that's really important to understand, is it's exempt from the reporting provisions of these standards, but you're still required, if you're performing evaluation, to do the work to meet the development standards. And the exemption applies solely to the reporting provisions of these standards.
All right, Cindy, I apologize. I'm going to have to cut you a little bit short. We still have Roberto and his folks that need to take up some time, and we are getting close on our ending time here.
Oh, no problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
And I was finished. So just if you have questions, you've got my information. You can give me a call. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you,
Thank you, Cindy. Now I have Roberto Castro. He's one of our correspondents, and he's going to be interviewing Fein and Shea Scarpa. So Roberto, you can take it from here.
Wonderful. Hi, David. Are you online with us?
I am. Hello.
Okay, perfect. Hi, how are you? And then Shea, are you online too?
Yes, and it's Shea.
Shea. I'm sorry. All right. Shea, I'm going to start off with you. You work for RMA. What is RMA and how in the world has it become so important for valuation analysts? And then I'll let you or David speak up about the latest trends and what's coming up. Again, tell us, why should we trust RMA?
So, a short story about RMA. So we've been in banking or serving lending institutions for over 100 years, actually close to 110 years. And what we do is we take membership from financial lending institutions and we provide products, services, events, conferences, forums, roundtables for those lending institutions. And we specifically work in areas of risk. So credit risk, market risk, operations risk, regulatory affairs. And I specifically work on one of our longest running products for 103 years is our annual statement studies, which is industry benchmarking data, which we collect directly from financial lenders. And David actually from Value Source is one of our best, most valued clients. And he can actually talk to you a little bit about the business valuation aspect to those financial statements.
Well, before you move to David, let me ask you a question and play the devil's advocate. And that is, you've got a lot of providers who are giving you the data. How do we know that their data is good and that we can use it? How much faith should we put in it?
So I would say the data that's coming from our financial lenders, they have to uphold to our RMA standards, specifically in their LOS or their spreading methodology. And we do provide them with those best practices. And then they ask when we are collecting those financial statements, our partners for spreading, they also have to follow those rules. So everybody's following those same data definitions, data requirements for our data transparency when we release the data every year.
Wonderful. So David, tell us about RMA and what are the changes that are coming, and how can valuation analysts use them?
Shea could probably talk more about changes coming. One of the changes that has been around for a little while is we worked with Shea to come out with a valuation edition of RMA. And what that is a lot more data. In other words, if you look at the standard RMA statement studies, you'll see, common size income statement, balance sheet, and ratios, and there's a single number. So what we've done is work with them to show the entire industry, in other words, the entire curve. So that's really helpful. So instead of just seeing, the average, pre-tax profit or whatever it is on an income statement, you can see the 10th decile through the 90th decile. And I think that's been a big improvement. I think valuators appreciate it because they can really take a look at what the entire industry is doing. And it really makes a difference because what we call it is ranking. In other words, instead of saying my company is 5% over the industry norm, you can say my company's at the 47th percentile or 83rd percentile. So it paints a much clearer picture of where the industry compares to your target company.
So Shea, in terms of the changes that are coming in and what the participants are providing you and David, give us a certain level of confidence that information is actionable and that we can rely on it.
Yes, so all the statements that we do collect, so in this past submission period, we collected over 140,000 financial statements from close to 150 of our member institutions. And the majority of those financial statements are audited financial statements. So they do have to apply to GAAP principles.
And let me just say this too. One of the things that I learned when we did the article and the sort of interview with Shea and RMA was they have training classes to train the people in the banks how to do this. They also have an RMA guide to spreading financial statements, which has all sorts of details in it. And it's on the article on our website. You can download that and see exactly the kinds of things that, the people that are inputting financial statements do. One of the things that I think about RMA that, back to your question about why do you trust it? The process is 100% transparent and documented. In other words, from how they collect it to the spreading guide to the math they use to do it. So you can actually look at any RMA number and you can't see the individual financial statements behind it, obviously, but you can see the trail of how those things were actually calculated. So I think that's an important piece. There's a lot of financial statement data out there that is not like that. And I think it's one of the things that, RMA shines, their transparency and the level of energy they put into training, facilitating. And if you people haven't seen the RMA guide to spreading financial statements, I would encourage everybody that uses it to take a look and see, what are they telling people to do? How do these financial statements get in and what kind of lens does it go through?
Now, David, along those lines, are there any PDFs or information that the audience can download by going to your site, or alternatively, Shea, to your site? And
if you Google value source RMA article, you'll find an article, and there's some links in there specifically in the RMA guide to spreading financial statements. So that's available as a PDF.
Yep. And all of the information, even about how we are compiling the data, you can come to the RMA site. And I did publish a blog, I think it was in 2020, about that actual process of, when we're collecting, what we're collecting, and everything that goes into it, which is, I think, a really insightful piece that we did.
Now, for the people who don't have RMA, and I imagine there may be a few, David, why don't you run them as to how can they use it or subscribe to it, or is there an option to test it?
I think I'm not sure about the option to test it. They can go to our website and download some samples. They can obviously go to if they're a NACFA member and a NACFA subscriber, they can go to NACFA and order it, or they can come to Value Source and order it also. But I think one of the things, like I said before, that is really unique about RMA is this idea that there's so much more data there. A vast majority of the financial statement benchmarking information out there has a single data point. Ratios, they may have a couple, high, medium, or low, or whatever, or first median and 75th quartile. But, you know, I think people should look at all the data out there and see the pluses and minuses and strengths and weaknesses and understand, you know, how it applies. There's strengths and weaknesses to every data set. And I think RMA has some particular strengths that are worth looking at.
Now I have a question from one of the audience participants, Paul Bardaro. He's asking, what problems or issues impacting balance sheets and income statements, if any, does RMA anticipate as most closely held companies adopt ASC 842, accounting for leases? Is that something that you can answer now or can maybe answer a little bit later? And this is both for you and Shea.
That would be a Shea question.
Yeah, I don't have any insight to that now, but I'm happy to do a little bit of research and provide a response later.
Yeah, that would be good if you can provide it to the Around Evaluation World. And then we can get back to Paul and other people that may have a similar question. Well, with that said, we've reached the hour. Is there any closing statements? Anything that I missed that I should have asked you? Shea, same for you, David.
Not that I can think of. The only thing I would say really is, you know, the annual statement studies itself has been around for 103 years. And I think that really does show the value that the lending industry, but also the whole financial services industry trusts what we're doing, because it hasn't changed much in those 103 years. So, perfect. And I appreciate you guys inviting me to today's webcast as well.
My last comment, Roberto, would be, not only do we have the data, but we have tools. So whether you're using our evaluation software, NAPAs, or you're using Excel, not only do we give you the data, but we give you the tools to do that ranking stuff, which I've always found really interesting. And like I said, paints a much clearer picture about how a target company compares to the industry.
Perfect. Well, Paul, we hope to get back to you with an answer and some guidance there with that question. And thank you both, David and Shea.
Thank you, guys.
My pleasure. Thank you, Alina. Back to you.
Thank you, Roberto, and thank you to Shea and David for this information. And with this, we just arrived to the finish of our show. So we'll see you next month. We will have our show on Monday. But also, if you did credits, you know, continuing education, remember that we have our conference in December. We are going to be in Fort Lauderdale, Park City, and virtual. So you still have time to register. And with this, thank you and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, presenters, panelists, everyone, attendees. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next month.